new digs. Why not, right? Let's give something new a try. We're heading into our new rules stuff as far as the metagame is concerned. And it's time to start talking about how some of the major changes are starting to affect the game overall. Now, you'll hear me say it often enough if you watch the Meta Lab. The rules, the game itself plays almost exactly the same. The only real differences going into the game are a certain number of timing things that change overall, and the way certain powers interact. That's grand scale of it. The way we move, the way we act, the way we basically play the game is very similar. Only really big difference is when you get into competitive play and we start to look at how actions are being made and when actions are being made. And one of the most important ones I kind of want to focus on today is something that's been in the metagame for a while, ever since launch, and that was the ID cards, who also happen to have equipment. It's another conversation. ID cards. They work a very different way, but not as bad as you think, and it actually kind of works to speed the game up a little. Allow me to explain. When first we had ID cards, they were that unique system where they were a power action you had to take at the beginning of your turn. Now, if any of you played in major tournaments on a regular basis, you start to realize the beginning of the turn was about 3/4 of the time taken for a turn. Because you're forced in that front end of the action, you're forced to make all your decisions ahead of time. Now with the new changes to the rules, the power action taken for the ID card can be taken anytime you can take actions normally throughout your turn, which is a great dynamic. For one, it allows you reaction times. You're no longer making the decision based at the beginning of the turn, and that's the only thing you're going to do. This is now an action you take throughout your turn. It could be the basis of your turn, or it could be a reaction to something that went terribly. I've seen a couple turns in games I've played where I look back and go, I wish I would have called in this ID card or used this ID card in the first place. Secondly, another change to it is that you no longer need, or you no longer have the requirement of having no action tokens. You can push to ID card should you so choose, which is another huge change. Just kind of simplify the whole act of them. It also gives you that additional option because there are actions throughout the turn. You get that second attempt to with a character who you just might see as an ID card Energizer Bunny, as it were. A couple of them that come to mind would be a Devil Dinosaur. A lot of people use as what I like to call the ID card Energizer Bunny, where you just keep pumping ID cards out with that guy. So these are a lot of this is what really makes them that much better. And the other thing is how the inspiration from the character now functions. It functions a little bit differently in the sense that the inspiration itself it immediately occurs right when the character is called in. So as soon as they're called in, everybody adjacent to the character called in gets that. Now, why this is great is that you can just immediately go, boom, drop the guy, go running shot, charge, whatever you're going to do, but they get that inspiration now, which has longer term ramifications if you can build up your team or position your team in just such a way to take advantage of that. And these are all important things we're going to be starting to take into account as far as the metagame is concerned. The real name and the names of characters still maintains. There's a little bit of confusion about that. So the way we've been picking our characters for ID cards stays exactly the same. Almost exactly the same is actually the wrong choice of words for that. Where things get a little wacky is how we interact with the round table. Because we're so used to ID card at the beginning of the turn, oh cool, I happen to pull up the card slot that I just used. Now it's time for me to put that card back, still beginning of the turn phase. That's gone now. If you think about it in the grand scale of things, everything that happens from the beginning of the turn with the teleporter, the Justice League teleporter, which is the only round table type thing left in the game now, we now use that very differently in the metagame, and we have to think around that a little better. You know, we no longer get all those bonuses at the beginning of the turn. Everything that's the beginning of the turn has to happen at the beginning of the turn. We have to do that then. So, for instance, if you call in a character, you roll a 6 and you happen to pull up number 2, and you use number 2 to roll that 6, well, guess what? You're still in the middle of your turn, which means you have to get to your next turn without taking any damage from an opposing character's attack in order to not rotate that round table any further. So these are all the elements we have to start thinking about in how we're using strategies with the ID cards. We can still do your sidestep ID cards. You can TK ID card with anybody now. It is no longer required to be Jean Grey. Jean Grey does happen to be able to use TK twice, so you got a little bit of a safety net. Plus, it still gets you out of that 5 square radius, which you kind of need to abuse in a lot of cases, because in another episode we're going to talk about how important Colossal Retaliation is about to become in the game is another element we still have to kind of look at, because as more and more Colossal... Another episode. Barf. So yeah, ID cards as on a whole, the way we use them is way more flexible. That's dangerous. That's a kind of danger that you have to be careful of, you have to be aware of, but you also can abuse yourself. We all know we love ID cards, we use them excessively, and that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. The more characters we get to use, the better. So, as we go into the future with the way that they work functionally now, it's kind of an exciting time. They work very differently. It's all part of your turn itself. They can be a reaction to your mistakes. They can be a reaction to terrible dice rolls after the fact. If a dice roll goes bad, but you have the option to call something in that could later help you recover from that problem, awesome. But this is now the way you can start thinking of ID cards. And in the long term, this really changes the way we play the game a lot. So, guys, think competitively in this sense. Be ready to react, act however you want to with the ID cards. But do also remember, keep an eye on those round tables and the way they function, because they don't work the same way anymore, and we have to adapt to the new way that they function. So that's been this week with your meta fix. A little bit longer episode than normal, I know, because there's a lot to cover when we cover these new rules. But without getting into too much of a long-winded discussion, as I've already been long-winded, get some time, get these guys out, use these ID cards in your practice games, because as always, guys, practice will make your teams better.